conceived in Tanzania and raised there for my early part of the years. My family then moved to London on my 8th birthday. My mom made this huge, massive chocolate 8 cake. And the house was empty. I blow the candles of the cake. We all have a bite and we hop on a plane to London. Stayed there for a couple years and eventually made our way to Los Angeles. Shakti is a primordial force. It's an energy, does not have a form. And it's so interesting when we look at these 9 goddesses, there's an evolution of womanhood through that, from innocence into full development of fierceness. And Kali is one of the goddesses that's known for her shadow work that she does, for tapping into that fierce energy and it being okay in being feminine.
To start to just feel into that, what would it be like to have a baby, to be a mom, to have that relationship, to feel that in your life?
The work that her and I did was visualization. The work that these psychedelics do is they bring this visualization to life, where we can really feel, smell, breathe, touch it, and it shortens the amount of time. The real power is that visualization, and psychedelics just get you there faster. And I kid you not, 3 months after our work, she got pregnant, and she got a 2-year-old. So a lot of my work before actually doing any of the medicine is helping clients understand, gosh, this ketamine isn't the cure, you're the cure. You have to trust that first before we can even journey.
Welcome to the Healing Mindset, brought to you by Marble Minds. We are a next-generation mental health clinic delivering Spravato and ketamine therapy to people with depression. I'm your host, David Drapkin. In today's episode, I'm joined by Ekta Agarwal, and she's a licensed psychotherapist and founder of Shakti Therapy in Los Angeles. In our chat, Ekta shares how she uses ketamine-assisted therapy to help clients slow down, reconnect with themselves, and uncover what truly needs healing within. We explore somatic approaches to trauma, the role of neuroplasticity in long-term change, and how integration practices, daily routines, shape who we become and want to be. Ekta also weaves together some of her spiritual psychology alongside evidence-based methods like EMDR and brain spotting. It's a really holistic approach to transformation that she takes. I love it. And then in the final part of our discussion, we dive into the deeper meaning of Shakti, not only the name of her clinic, but also the divine feminine energy that represents creativity, healing, and the revelation of truth. Enjoy. It's an inspiring and deeply grounding conversation. So take a deep breath and enjoy this episode of the Healing Mindset. I want to start off by just saying thanks for being here. I know you're very busy. What's life been like for you recently?
Oh, that's a great question. It's been full. When I'm just getting ready to host a gala at the end of this month. And part of when we get ready for this is I think about the whole year, and I feel like LA has been so heavy this year with the fires, the political climate, and ICE. There's just so much happening. And in so many ways, I feel like it's reflecting parts of my life that have felt heavy and parts that I'm learning to just kind of release and let go. And interestingly, I just feel like I'm chasing to get to the end of the year, and it makes me laugh a little bit because you get to the end of the year and you start over. Nothing changes. So what am I chasing to get there? So it's a funny feeling I'm sitting with.
Yeah, I know that feeling, just trying to be in the moment. And there's a question I wanted to ask you that's really foundational about how did you end up in LA, and what kind of life path have you had up until now, especially looking back? What does it mean to you?
Yeah. So I was conceived in Tanzania and raised there for my early part of the years. And my family then moved to London on my 8th birthday. My mom made this huge, massive chocolate 8 cake. And the house was empty. I blow the candles of the cake. We all have a bite and we hop on a plane to London. And stayed there for a couple years and eventually made our way to Los Angeles. So these journeys between these different continents, these different communities, it's really shaped how, one, I understand people, how I understand community, and also what I started to learn about myself. I realized I was consistently navigating the different cultures of being African, of being South Asian, of being British American, of being American now. And I felt myself kind of fragmented in all of these different spaces. I actually have a funny story. When I came here, I was in 2nd grade. And I went to a Catholic school when I was in Tanzania. Anytime we heard any type of emergency, ambulances, we were taught to do the Holy Cross. Now, at that age, I did not know it was the Holy Cross. I was just told when someone's in trouble, you do this and God will take care of them. So I'm in second grade here in the States, and we hear this ambulance, and this is what I do. And someone asks, "Are you a Christian?" And I'm just so surprised. Like, where are they coming up with that? I'm like, of course not. Why do you think that? And so I went home and I asked my parents, what does this mean? And that's when I learned it's a cross. So you can see just how fragmented my identity was and how I was living in between so many different worlds. So when I think about my life today, I see it as a collection of all of these different worlds that I live in between. And that in between space is actually, funny enough, what I call home. And I've also learned that healing actually happens in that in between. It's that gray area, not that black, not that white. And so that's the integration space I live in and how I think of how my life has transformed.
I love that. I love those spaces. I've often thought about, transitions, of the moments between different states of consciousness, but also just states of being. In Tibetan Buddhism, they've got this concept of bardo states, sleep, but also death and reincarnation. And we go through a lot. There's so many different spaces in our life. So the question, I guess, to ask you is, how do you identify now? Like, with the work that you've done on yourself, spiritually speaking, as a woman, like, what are some of the things that when you breathe into them, they feel truly you and yours?
Yeah. How do I identify now? I think the word that immediately comes to mind is complete. And it's taken a lot for me to literally come to this word because of all the fragmentation I've been through. And, it's not only just the places I've lived and the identities I've created, but also struggled with this idea of masculine and feminine and which one should I be and how do I be both and how do I pick one in certain situations? How do I be Eastern and Western and still feel like I'm keeping my community, but I'm still assimilating? So when I say complete today, there is this sense of, gosh, I don't have to pick. I can be pieces of all and create my own. And I breathe into that a lot, especially when I'm anxious, which is consistently all the time living in LA, and reminding myself that in that anxiety, there is a sense of home already. And how can I breathe into that completeness, breathe into the certainty and uncertainty at the same time?
I love the idea of being complete, but not needing to be perfect, and being the sum, not being more than the sum of your parts as well. So you can include everything, all the little parts, but they don't just.
I think we forget that humanity is flawed in its foundation. And that's not a bad thing. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how pain serves us. And knowing that, it becomes really easy to not try to reach for perfection because it just doesn't really exist.
Yeah. And as a therapist, that's really helpful to be able to tell people around perfection, and it doesn't exist. And that means, in that case, well, so much is allowed. We can give ourselves permission to be so much more when we're not trying to be everything all at once.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
So, one therapist to another, what do you love about being a therapist the most, Ekta?
Yeah, I definitely feel like this is my calling. This is my purpose. I was guided into this work in every sense. I was not the little girl that grew up and said, I wanted to be a teacher or I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be a criminal investigator and solve crimes. So it's interesting how I'm all the way in this other space where, although I'm not solving crimes, I'm solving the inner workings of humanity. And, I think that each and every single person has a little piece of a god or a goddess in them. And you're going to love my analogy. If consciousness or God, goddess is this cookie, There's like a crumb in every single one of us. And when all the crumbs come together, we have a whole chocolate chip cookie. And when we see that, and I see my role as a therapist, I see that what I get to do is awaken that part in a person. And so much of humanity is us forgetting it, wearing this mask to live this human experience. And our journey and our evolution is finding out and rediscovering that, gosh, we are these cookie crumbs. We are these gods and goddesses. And as a clinician, I get to do that. I get to do that through identifying patterns. I get to do that through really holding the wisdoms and the stories that are being told and finding meaning more than just that was shitty. So it feels like such a privilege, the work that I get to do. I get to see people at their most vulnerable, and the opposite. I get to see people at their most victorious when they overcome these great challenges. So it is very much a privilege to be able to sit in that role.
I noticed as you were describing it, Ekta, you didn't mention any like diagnoses like depression or PTSD. So you're talking about, in a sense, outcomes that a client may well want, but they might not know that they want, or they might not intend for that to happen. Because often we get labeled with, oh, this is my problem. I want to get rid of this. But what actually are we? Are we just trying to get rid of things? Or is it actually something within us, I guess I'm hearing you saying, this kind of crumb of the cookie that we've become disconnected from, that we've lost, and maybe we don't know exists anymore? So help to believe that it's there, or just to find it.
Yeah, so great observation, first of all. The way that I talk is very much spiritual psychology versus clinical psychology. And I'll take a minute to kind of distinguish the two. Clinical psychology says, hey, your past experiences and belief systems have created patterns, and these patterns have created symptoms. The collection of symptoms over time has created problems in your life and have led to this diagnosis, this label. So much of society identifies with this label that we don't even say, oh, I'm struggling with depression or I have anxiety. It's like, oh, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. It becomes an identity. Now, spiritual psychology, slightly different take. Yes, your past experiences and belief systems create these messages, symptoms, messages in your body. These messages are trying to tell you something about you. If you take a minute to listen to those whispers, you'll be able to understand what your body needs, not only to heal, but to transform. So similar concept, just different sides of the coin here. And so one is about curing, the other one is about being curious. And so I lean into the curiosity because, in all honesty, the word curing just feels really heavy. And if you don't accomplish it, then what? And so when you were curious, there's space for curing, there's space for listening, there's space for transforming, there's space for surrender and acceptance. There's not just one solution, there's multiple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you explain that. Thanks.
Yeah. And so I do believe humans are so simply complicated is probably the way that I put it, that if we just consistently focus on the symptoms and same ideology, intergenerational trauma, we miss the messages. We miss the intergenerational wisdom. Everything in life is a duality. Wherever there's darkness, we've heard, there's light. And so wherever there's problems, there's also solutions. And I just choose to shift that perspective a little bit. That doesn't mean we don't deal with symptoms. Absolutely, we deal with them. But we also really talk about what are the solutions, what are the messages that are already within you.
I love it. I want to get into the technical stuff. With spiritual psychology, what could be some of the techniques you'd use, or some of the practices clients would use outside of sessions that would help them to kind of develop that curiosity and to reveal this aspect of self that might not be that alive?
Yeah, really, really good question. I think the difference is language, which is what you just picked up on. When a client comes in, the first thing I do let them know is, Yes, you will get a diagnosis. Yes, we will treat symptoms, but it's not going to be the heart and soul of this work. And a lot of the work is going to be around cultivating awareness. It's sitting in presence, not sitting in the future, not sitting in the past. And we do this in clinical psychology anyway. Present is grounded. Sitting in the future is anxiety. Sitting in the past is depression. So instead of just using anxiety and depression, I just use the words that are a little bit more relatable, a little bit more accepted. And when we come from that space, what we're doing is creating energetic alignment versus clinical challenges. So that's something that we'll start with is language. I also really love the idea of using language when describing yourself. Oh gosh, I always do something wrong. Well, do you always do something wrong? Like, we talk so negatively about ourselves, and just putting a pause button on that for a second and really evaluating that, questioning the brain. Our brain is so intelligent, but it is wired to sit in comfort. So if your languaging is always, I always do something wrong, the brain just gets wired to that. And you have to stop it actively and ask, like, wait, is that true? And as soon as you ask your brain that question, it has a list of answers. And funny enough, you'll find out that your brain will actually say, no, that is actually not true. Well, if it knows that, then why does it keep going till you always do something wrong? So it's really creating that pause between the work that we do. And the other third piece I would say is the fundamental difference here with spiritual psychology that I work on with folks is the difference between fixing and being. In a world that we live in. Everyone, especially in LA, it's such a hustle culture of doing and doing and doing, and every single person has a full-time job and a hustle project, including myself. Everyone is trying to fit in a meditation, and gosh, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but me too. I'm in a sauna and I'm like meditating at the same time and trying to do two things at the same time. And I have a client who was like, oh yeah, I meditate on 1.5 speed. So it makes me think, are we doing the things to be present and heal because they're the right things to do? Or are we actually doing them to be? And that's a big part of the work that we do is in session. It's a lot of being, and it's so uncomfortable for clients because they want a solution. They want to fix it. They want to know what they need to do. And if I can just get them to be in 3 months, chances are so high that they're already going to be on the other side. But it's hard to see that because we're wired to consistently do and not be. So a lot of my clients would describe my sessions as feeling soft and slow, which again, uncomfortable because it's different and not something that our body is accustomed to. And 3 months later, you ask them how are the sessions, they'll say, oh my gosh, it feels so expansive. It feels like a world that I didn't know existed inside of me. And that's exactly what we do is tap into that world inside of them.
Oh, there was so much there. That was lovely. Thanks, Ekta. And it is a slightly different way of doing things.
Yeah.
It really is. I think we're often taught that as therapists, it's complicated. There's all these theories, and, it's primarily brain focused, kind of CBT focused. You have to do things differently. But this idea of slowing things down, and I was just with a client today, we were talking for most of the session about somatic therapy, embodiment, and, regulating the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And, there was that sense, oh yeah, I think, heard of that. I understand that conceptually. But for me, a big piece around this is, are you embodied right now? So maybe folks watching this or listening to this, are you embodied right now? It doesn't matter if you understand what I mean by embodied or if you have like somatic presence. So are you right now tuned into the presence of your body, the experiences within them, the sensations, and the kind of fluid process of having this existence beyond just the thinking brain? And I think what you're saying, Ekta, is it's very much around somatic embodiment, just being, in a sense, being able to like short circuit the brain's hijacking of our sense of reality and self.
It's interesting. somewhere in my journey, I heard that nature always has a beautiful way of self-correcting itself and healing itself. So I was thinking a lot about what is that when it comes to someone who's anxious? What is that when it comes to someone who's deregulated and their nervous system is a little bit chaotic? And it comes to the simple answer of breath. And we know this intellectually, but so many of us are not willing to accept that breath can regulate the nervous system. Gratitude. It's proven science at this point that when you're deeply in a state of gratitude, there's no way you can feel anxious. There's no way you can feel depressed. Your nervous system is regulated in that moment. You can feel emotion. Your heart starts to open, possibly, yes. But when we tell people to be grateful, when we tell people to just breathe, it just feels like, oh, no, 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 it can't be that simple, right? But to your point, embodiment is so simple. And it is literally the act of being. And gosh, my mind's going wild. And, the other thought is they're showing that ideation has gone down tremendously in the world. So innovation is not happening as quickly as it used to back in the day. And the number one reason to that is people are overstimulated and they're not bored. Or another way of saying it, they're not being. We're consistently on our laptops, watching TV, on our phones, scrolling. That ideas generate in that state of being, in that state of boredom. And so there's so much value in what you're saying about embodiment.
And so part of how you do your work is slow and soft, because that actually gives the clients an opportunity or makes them slow down, tune in, and just see what is there. And some of this is around, I like to talk about the inner healing intelligence quite a bit, but this idea that there is something inside of us that naturally wants to heal. Like you were talking about nature, and you've just gone through the horrific fires in LA. I was just on the toilet earlier, and I've done this radical thing of not being on my telephone when I go to the loo. I put books now in each of my bathrooms.
Yeah.
And the one downstairs is a book about mushrooms by Paul Stamets. Nothing to do with psychedelics. It's all about myco-reforestation, myco-restoration, myco-filtration. And so he's saying after a forest fire, the first things to recolonize are mushrooms, the mycelium. And then that brings in plants and animals and snails and birds. So nature has a way of regenerating, like this phoenix from the flames. And we're part of that. So I think there's something within us that gets shut down, and trauma plays a big role in that. But it's still there. The key to healing is absolutely like right in that spot where that trauma, that pain, that fear, that shadow is within us.
I think that's so beautifully said. When I think of Shakti Therapy and Healing Services is the name of my practice, you hit on it. Shakti is that inner healer, that wisdom, that primordial force that is in each and every single one of us that's responsible for change, confidence, and courage. But that only happens when you can tap into that, when you can tap into that quote unquote gut feeling, that whisper within you, the part of you that knows what to do, but we're always seeking that validation from everyone else. And what if that validation is already just that voice, and it's you pausing to listen to that, pausing to listen to that greater consciousness that's coming from within you.
I want to hear more about Shakti, because I've known for years that that's your practice name, and so the story that you've personally had around connecting with that energy, the different kind of avatars within it, and also I know you just had was it Navratri festival as well?
Yeah. You're so culturally tapped in. I love it. Yes.
Yeah, I spent 6 months in India many, many moons ago, and it was like absolutely life-changing. And there's something beautiful about that culture, but just seeing all the different kind of deities and gods and manifestations. So the energy that we're talking about with forest fires and the mushrooms coming back and kind of the phoenix rising from the flames. I know that the kind of the Durga energy is that's an aspect of Shakti. So, but what does Shakti mean to you? What does Shakti feel to you, and who is Shakti kind of within you, but also within a healing process where clients can connect with their own
Love
Shakti
that.
energy?
I love that. So I'll back up and move into that. So Navratri, we're literally just closing out. Yesterday was Diwali, and Navratri is so special to me because it is 9 days of honoring the goddess, of honoring the different forms of Shakti. And Shakti is a primordial force. It's an energy, it does not have a form. And in Hinduism, the forms are the 9 goddesses that it takes over time. And it's so interesting when we look at these 9 goddesses, there's an evolution of womanhood through that, from innocence into full development of fierceness. And Kali is one of the goddesses that's known for her shadow work that she does, for tapping into that fierce energy and it being okay in being feminine. Feminism isn't only just sovereignty and sacrifice, but there is that whole duality of it. And I think it makes us really think about this idea of our inner truth versus ego. An acronym I heard about ego, which I love so much, is when you have ego, you are edging God out. And I thought that that was so interesting because ego is such a human experience and we're not connected to the divine when we are coming from that space. So when I think about Navratri, even though it is about shedding light in the form of darkness, for me, it's also taking off that mask and letting your authenticity breathe. And when we take off that mask, it's kind of scary because people literally see the rawness that's inside of you. But every trauma we work through, in therapy, in life, in personal development, every pattern we release, every truth that we can reclaim, that's our own personal Shakti that we're getting close to. And so I love to often invite clients to journey with me in this way and remind them, gosh, in that darkness, you're not broken. In that depression, in that anxiety, you are not left alone. You're not the only one there. And that this battle is between the divine and the human experience and learning to shine that light within. Yeah, does that make sense? I know it can feel a little metaphysical.
Yeah, we can do metaphysics. That's okay. It's, I love the validation of darkness, that there's kind of truth and light within it, but there's meaning, and doesn't mean that you've failed or that you are broken. And that's great for someone, personally speaking, someone who has lived with depression on and off for a long time. I'd love to jump into the ketamine topic that I'm just dying to talk about. That's how we first connected years ago. So you use ketamine with your clients. I'd love to hear what have you found, Ekta, that ketamine really helps clients with the most? So clients coming in with certain issues, conditions, problems, goals, diagnoses, some kind of lifestyle characteristics. Who does ketamine help the most?
Yeah. So I love using ketamine therapy mainly for treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, or even complex PTSD. I would say, interestingly, it has just a profound impact for grief or even anticipatory grief. And what I mean by anticipatory grief is mothers who are grieving not being, women who are grieving not being able to be mothers. And so losing that part of themselves, knowing that, gosh, I'll never be able to conceive in this way and what that means for me. And also a lot of high functioning folks. So think CEOs, CFOs, they're doing it all. They're doing it all and spread so thin that sometimes there's a sense of, why am I doing this? What is my real purpose? And so they go into that meaning making space to figure out who they are. My biggest clientele, which I feel so excited to say, is our multicultural folks. And they come in because they want someone who is a person of color, who understands the immigration experience, who understands the cultural nuances that may come up through these psychedelic journeys. And many of my clients have already tried talk therapy. They've tried SSRIs and mood stabilizers. And I want to take a minute and really share the research here between psychedelics, ketamine, and SSRIs. They both actually, SSRIs are about 30 to 40% effective, and ketamine assisted therapy is closer to 50 to 60% effective. Now, the biggest difference between these two is if you stop both of them within 2 weeks, all the symptoms are going to come back. The only difference is integration. And so a lot of people think, gosh, ketamine's going to cure me. This medicine is going to cure me. No, it's the integration with the ketamine that's going to help you reach a space that you want to be in. And integration takes us all the way to up to 6 months where that change is anchored in that sense of peace, happiness is felt. So a lot of my work before actually doing any of the medicine is helping clients understand, gosh, this ketamine isn't the cure. You're the cure. You have to trust that first before we can even journey.
But there's something with the integration that without the ketamine we wouldn't have. And that could be partially we're slowing down, we're reconnecting, we're embodying, but something is moving and changing within us. So that is quite radical, that we can do something for a short period of time, but that it opens something up that in a sense can lead to permanent change without having to take a tablet every single day. That's radical.
Yeah.
Looking at integration, Ekta, how do you describe what integration is, particularly for folks that aren't familiar with psychedelic protocols and treatment and research? What is integration?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
I would say integration is the heart and soul of the psychedelic experience, and it's where real healing actually happens. Ketamine gives you this like neuroplastic window that you talked about earlier, and it lasts for about 1 to 2 weeks. So your brain is really malleable, more open to wiring than you can even imagine. And when you feed it the things that you want to shift into with behaviors, with thought patterns, with practices, with habits, with relationships, you become and create this new blueprint for your life. I really like to think about this as you have this like clay figure of a person. And what ketamine does is it gives you this opportunity to remold it into a circle and recreate this new figure. But that requires time, that requires patience, that requires fine tuning and smoothing out the edges. So I always tell people to treat the 1 to 2 weeks of a psychedelic experience as if every single day is sacred, as if you are rebuilding this new blueprint, this version of you. And so be intentional, but what does that actually look like in practice? And there's a few things I encourage. One, movement. We've learned time after time that our body heals through movement. Inflammation gets reduced. More serotonin in the gut gets built with movement. Movement is key, whether that's gentle yoga, whether that's walking, whether that's dancing, which is by far my favorite, or even Muay Thai, which I love practicing. Any type of movement increases energy. And I've had clients come back and say, gosh, I just don't have energy. And something I tell people is energy is created and built upon more energy. And there's research over this. When you sleep too much, you're tired. When you eat too much, you're tired. Your energy is built when you eat just enough, sleep just enough, and you expand on that. A lot of the reason we think we don't have energy is because our mind is telling us that. It's not really our body. So number 2, meditation, breath work, meditation, breath work, or prayer. And this is keeping our nervous system regulated intentionally. It's creating that pause and focusing on that pause in between breaths. And when we do that, we are taking control of our nervous system and not letting it control us. It lets the mind recognize that there is this correlation between the two. And prayer also connects us with something greater than ourselves. When we're looking at that, we're not focused on a tunnel vision. We're looking at it in an expanded way. And we can then begin to identify with purpose there and meaning. Why am I living this world? Why am I living in this world? What is my purpose? What am I meant to do? And it starts to also erode at that ego, that voice that says, this is how you should be. This is what you're labeled. And so I really love incorporating that. The third is journals and in modern day voice notes, they go a long way. When you are writing down something, when you are talking through something, when you are even mirror talking, it gives your brain a chance to process and it activates the left side of the brain and not only the right side where emotions sit. But when we're activating this other side, there's a sense of rationality that starts to come in and a knowing that we hadn't known before because we were only feeling. And it pulls you back and starts to help you identify old patterns, old narratives. The fourth one is therapeutic integration. So this looks like something you would do with a therapist, a trusted and a trusted and cultured shaman, someone who's done the work for years, or a guide that's in the space. And you could include lot of different modalities. The ones that we love to work with are EMDR, IFS, and brain spotting, and somatic therapy, which you brought up earlier. So this puts you back into the body. It puts you back into the fragmented parts and brings them together. So doing that deep work in that time can be healing. The last one, which I know you and I hold really strongly in belief with, is community and nature. Go and connect with people. Go and connect with birds and nature and plants and spend time watering your plants and just observing like where are they growing, what's dying. And just that connection is so powerful and it just keeps you centered. And a lot of this is sacred repetition. You do that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, your whole biology and chemistry is going to start to change and alter.
That was great. Thank you for going into so much detail. It, in a sense, is a menu, and maybe people can just pick their top 3 or top 5 for now. But the idea is it's really unique, and there's so many different ways of changing ourself and changing our life with really small kind of levers. Because I think a lot of clients, I want to be happy. I want to know who I am and, in a sense, just change my life. But how do I do it? And that's a really big question. In a sense, the question's just too big. And so I honestly find, Ekta, that a lot of clients stop believing they can change, their life can be different. So they stop expecting more and they just accept the kind of status quo and the stuckness of life and the not really loving being alive or loving themselves or hoping for more, hoping for change. But psychedelics is this openness as a catalyst. Change is possible. The neuroplasticity, keep it going for a couple of weeks, invest in as much as you can in each day as sacred, and then choose from this massive menu of integration, so many different ways to change yourself, to change your life, so that when you look back, it's like, wow, I feel different, I am different, my life is different.
Yeah, and one piece I'll add to that is it's not about doing it all. It's picking one thing and making that 2 millimeter shift. That's it. And that 2 millimeter shift has such a rippling effect. You know, one shift could be you pick up the phone and every day you text one new person you've lost in touch with and you ask them, hey, how are you? And you send an old photo. Can you imagine what that 2 millimeter shift can ripple into a year from then? The shift in community, the shift in friendships, the shift in belonging that you might have just by making that one change. So a lot of times we get so stuck into trying to do everything, and it's that 1-2 millimeter shift that you get to make that can have this profound impact.
Thank you for that. I've been trying to do that a little bit lately, is making more effort to connect with people. Because I think, I don't know, I might just be getting too personal here. But it's so easy for us to get isolated and disconnected, especially working online. Like all my jobs are on this little laptop of mine. So I'm trying to make an effort to reconnect with people, little text messages here and there, thinking of you. And I also got a bicycle as well the last few months. So that gets me out of the house. I feel I've got a hobby. It's riding my bike and it's great. So I think just these little things that are new, like something new. Right? When was the last time that you did something new or tried something new? Yeah, it's just reinvigorating, I think, to give ourselves permission, almost like children. to have excitement about something, like to get a gift. But the gift is our life, and we just relate to being alive in a new way by believing in it and having a bit more hope.
Yeah, I really love that. I love how you found your own way to play and reconnect with life. That just feels so alive hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, and just personally, I used to always have a bicycle. I was like a big bike rider everywhere I lived around the world. I had a bicycle, didn't really often have a car. And I feel like I'm kind of reclaiming a part of my old energy and a part of my life having this bicycle now. So it's lovely. And I get to look at it right now. It's in my office, so it's right over there. And I wanted to ask you actually, Ekta, yeah, you mentioned techniques as particularly EMDR and brain spotting. So IFS we've talked about quite a bit in other interviews. EMDR and brain spotting we haven't, and I haven't actually done those trainings. I know all about IFS. I love it to bits, and somatic approaches, but EMDR and brain spotting. Can you just tell us what that is? And I know you've got other clinicians that work with you and that you supervise, so maybe some of them are might be expert in different techniques, but just talk us through what they are and how they help people, particularly, and also if you're combining it with ketamine, how they work
Yeah,
together.
absolutely. Yes, we have a group of clinical therapists that work in this holistic approach, and some of them are trained in EMDR and brain spotting. When I talk about this to clients, what I tell them is although it is considered a clinical approach that focuses on the mind, it brings a lot of your body into the work and less about the thinking. So with EMDR, it's this rapid
Hmm.
eye movement where you are following a device. And when you're doing that, you kind of put in this like meditated state, one breath to one movement kind of philosophy, and your brain moves into this like repetition. When it moves into the repetition space, your conscious mind is not as present, it's not as ready to come up with an answer and play detective. And so it taps into a little bit of that unconscious mind. This is also something that happens with walking. Walking therapy is so good for men because they're not making eye contact. So they don't have to worry about how I'm being perceived. And there's this like motion, this repetition of motion that allows you just keep going and tap slightly into your unconscious mind. EMDR and brain spotting does that in a greater way. And so it's really good to be able to help deal with the traumas without always necessarily reliving it for that person because you're just keeping them going. And as soon as someone breaks, a clinician gets them back. Nope, we've got to keep going. And so when you break, there's this sense of, no, let me explain my pain. Let me tell you what's happening to relive. But the art is in keeping that rhythmic space going. So there's not an emotion that's coming up. There's not a thought that's coming up, but it's just the unconscious releasing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you've kind of also answered the question of why it works well with ketamine as well, because we're moving away from that conscious mind, but also ego. It slips more into the
Yeah, like
subconscious.
it lowers the default mode network, the part that just keeps talking all the time to us, even in our silence.
Maybe just to close us out, Ekta, working with ketamine, particularly with spiritual psychology, do you have any clients' experiences with mystical experiences or finding new parts of themselves or just connecting with life in new ways where the ketamine and spiritual psychology has been really powerful for helping that person find a new part of themselves or recreate a life in a new way?
Yeah, I really love this question, and I'll share a story in answering this. I had a very Asian American boss woman, and she was just top of her game, really making a difference, and in her 40s. And the biggest challenge was she couldn't conceive. And she just tried every medical intervention that existed out there. And by the time she came to me, she was just confident that being a mother was not in her cards. And so we were working on a lot of that anticipatory grief that came up. And through our work, when we lowered this part that said she couldn't be her mother, we explored what would it be like for her to be a mother? What kind of mother would she be? What would she name her child? How does she see that 10 year, 5 years, 20 years, that child's now being grown? And we painted that picture. And although it was so painful for her because there was this part of, I'll never have that, she trusted the process and the journey from there. And that to me is just so spiritual, right? It's why are we not getting the things we want? Why are we experiencing these pains? A lot of these questions are very spiritual. They really make us look at what is the purpose of life and help us search for meaning and connection. And when we do that, we're connecting to that spiritual sense, that soul with the capital S, and it gets us closer to truth, love, and purpose. And so once we got through that, we went through a psychedelic journey with ketamine, and we did 4 sessions. Every single session, she met her baby. And first, the baby was just a little egg. Then the baby was growing. Then the baby could talk. Then the baby shared their name. And I kid you not, 3 months after our work, she got pregnant. And she has a 2-year-old today.
Wow.
And she tells me that baby looks identical to what she experienced in her ketamine journey. And the name is the same. She named it the same. But she saw her baby that wanted to come from spirit into matter. But she just had to believe that she had what it took to create that home. Not only for herself, but for the spirit to show up.
I can't believe we were going to end the podcast and you weren't going to tell that story out there. How dare you? That was amazing. Wow.
Magic,
that,
right?
that sacred work. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives me goosebumps every time I
Thank you for
think
doing
about
that work. Yeah, I feel that. It's beautiful work. Thank you for helping that person connect. And maybe briefly, I just want to say, you did some really skillful work as a therapist there, just in helping her feel confident and trusting you to start to just feel into that. What would it be like to have a baby, to be a mom, to watch them grow up, to have that relationship, to feel that in your life? Because I think for a lot of us, when there's something that we don't want, or that we don't want to ask ourselves that most difficult question. We don't want to think about that thing, whatever that thing is that we really want, or we really don't want, or we're really scared of, that we know we need to change it. We know we need to stop doing. We don't want to think about it because it's just too complicated. It's too painful. I don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to just push it away. But actually, if we can bring ourselves to it, then there's a part of us that we actually need to give permission to, either to live, to be alive within us and to integrate that, or to mourn and to grieve and to let something go. Both are part of nature in that cycle, and we have to give them, permission to exist. But then some magic happened with your client. Perhaps that was actually something that needed to be opened up. She had to really feel that in its fullness, bring in the ketamine, do that work, and then wow, it actually led to something that was beyond belief.
Yeah, it makes me think a lot about visualization and the power of it. And the work that her and I did was visualization. The work that these psychedelics do is they bring this visualization to life, where we can really feel, smell, breathe, touch it. And it shortens the amount of time. But the real power is that visualization. And psychedelics just get you there faster. And so if you can really breathe, feel, touch, experience whatever that moment is you have, if you want to awaken, all you're doing is calling it into your life. And so there's a lot of power and magic that you have as your own creator. And it started with her believing that there is space for me to be a mother. I could call that in, and then witnessing that.
And it literally was a calling in. So that visualization is calling something in. And you also said earlier, Ekta, around gratitude, how powerful that is. So there's a real theme of gratitude as well. It almost makes things seem tangible or makes us grateful for what actually is, whether we see it or not, or it's real or not. It's an energy that lives within us, and we can be grateful for that.
Beautifully put. Yeah, that resonates fully.
All right, so Ekta Agarwal, we did it. This is lovely. Before we say toodaloo, tell folks where they can find out more information about you.
Yeah, please come say hi to me. I love starting conversations and developing connections. You can find me on Instagram and social media at Shakti Therapy, SHAKTI Therapy. And of course, my website is another great place, www.shaktitherapyhealing.com. Shoot me an email, even if you just want to chat and say hi, and we can take it from there. Thank you so much, David, for having me here. It's so nice just to sit in space from one clinician to another and just chat. This was a really treat for me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And how are your legs feeling? Because you're cross-legged.
I love sitting cross-legged when we go to temple. We sit like this for hours. So this is very natural for me.
Oh, you're a legend. Well done. Ekta, thank you. Can't wait to do more of this. And everyone for listening and watching to Healing Mindset, thank you so much. God bless for now.